As I sat in the worn pew of our small-town church, the familiar scent of polished wood and lingering incense enveloped me. The sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor, but the vibrant hues did little to lift the heaviness that hung over my heart. I glanced down at my clasped hands, my wedding ring glinting under the light, a stark reminder of the vows I had taken with Tom. Yet lately, those vows felt like chains, binding me to a life that seemed increasingly disconnected from the woman I once was. Tom had been working long hours on a construction project, pouring his heart and soul into the job. I admired his dedication. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to feel more like a ghost in our own home. The laughter we once shared over dinner was replaced by silence, the kind that fills a room but goes unacknowledged. I yearned for connection, for someone to see me, to truly see me. As the pastor's voice echoed through the sanctuary, I found my mind drifting. I caught glimpses of families around me, their faces lit with joy and faith, while I felt like an intruder in my own life. I wanted to be strong, to embody the devoted churchgoer everyone expected me to be, but inside, I was fraying. After the service, as the congregation began to disperse, I remained seated, hoping to gather my thoughts. That's when I noticed Pastor Mark approaching. He was a man of genuine warmth, always offering a kind word or a comforting hand on the shoulder. Today, however, there was something different in his demeanor. A quiet concern etched across his face. "Sarah," he said softly, taking a seat beside me, "you seemed a bit distant today. Is everything all right?" I hesitated, my heart racing at the prospect of sharing my feelings. "I'm just feeling a bit lost, I guess. Tom's been so busy, and I'm struggling to keep everything together." Mark nodded, his gaze steady and understanding. "It's okay to feel that way. Life can become overwhelming. Sometimes we just need someone to talk to." I felt a swell of emotions rising within me, a longing for someone to hear my struggles without judgment. "I don't know, Mark. It's like I'm fading away. I used to feel so alive, but now my voice trailed off, the weight of my unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. "Sometimes we need to reconnect with what truly matters," he said gently. "Faith, community, and each other. You're not alone in this, Sarah." His words struck a chord deep within me, and before I realized it, I leaned in, seeking the comfort of his presence. In that moment, the world outside faded away, and it felt as though it was just the two of us. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to sink into the warmth of the moment, the vulnerability wrapping around us like a soft blanket. And then, in a sudden rush of emotion, I felt his lips on mine. The kiss was unexpected, electrifying, sending shockwaves through my entire being. My eyes flew open in disbelief, and I pulled back, my heart racing with a mix of guilt and something I couldn't quite identify. "Mark," I stammered, my mind racing. "I shouldn't have." "Sarah," "I'm sorry," he interrupted, his eyes wide with surprise. "I didn't mean to overstep, but I felt something, and I thought you might have too." My breath caught in my throat. I had never considered that this moment could lead to such a revelation. The spark ignited something within me, a desire I had buried beneath layers of duty and expectation. Torn between guilt for my actions and the thrill of this newfound connection, I felt as though I was teetering on the edge of a precipice. "I need to go," I whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me, and hurried out of the church, the cool air outside hitting my flushed cheeks. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more chaotic than the last. I felt like I was running from something I didn't fully understand, a part of myself that had been dormant for far too long. As I walked away from the church, the kiss replayed in my mind, an intoxicating mix of exhilaration and dread. What had just happened? What did it mean for my marriage, for my life? The weight of my choices settled heavily on my shoulders, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. I stood in my kitchen, the familiar scent of baked chicken wafting through the air, yet everything felt different, tainted by the weight of the kiss that lingered in my mind. Tom was sprawled on the couch, flipping through channels, his easy laughter and the mundane chatter of the television juxtaposed sharply against the storm brewing inside me. I glanced at him, his hair tousled and his work boots still on, and my stomach twisted. How could I pretend everything was normal when my heart was caught in a web of confusion? "Hey, babe, how was your day?" he asked, his voice warm and inviting, pulling me from my thoughts. I forced a smile, the kind that felt brittle on my lips. "It was fine. Just the usual." "Just the usual," he chuckled, clearly expecting more. "You've got to tell me what's on your mind. You're awfully quiet tonight." I was quiet because my mind was racing. How could I tell him about the kiss? About the way Pastor Mark had made me feel desired, alive, but also guilty? Just tired, I guess. "Work has been busy," I finally muttered, trying to downplay my inner turmoil. Tom nodded, his attention still glued to the TV. "Well, we should talk about our anniversary. I was thinking we could go to that Italian place you love. You know, the one with the outdoor seating." I swallowed hard, the thought of our anniversary suddenly feeling like a weight instead of a joy. "Sure, that sounds nice," I managed to say, but my heart wasn't in it. How could I celebrate a love that felt so fractured? As I moved around the kitchen preparing our meal, I felt the familiar pull of my phone. I picked it up, my heart racing as I saw Mia's name flash on the screen. I needed to talk to someone, to unload this heavy burden. I quickly texted her. "Can we meet? I need to talk." "Of course. I'm free. Want to come over?" she replied almost instantly. I glanced at Tom, who was still engrossed in the TV, and shook my head. "I can't stay here. Not like this," I thought to myself. "I need to figure this out." Later that evening, I found myself sitting across from Mia at our favorite coffee shop, the familiar hum of chatter around us doing little to soothe my frayed nerves. "Sarah, you look terrible." "What's going on?" she asked, concern etching her features. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. It's about Mark," I whispered, feeling the weight of my confession. "He kissed me." Mia's eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, Sarah. What? How did that happen?" "It was during prayer. I was feeling so lost and confused, and he just kissed me." I didn't stop him. My voice trembled as I spoke, the shame washing over me. I didn't want to stop him. Mia leaned in closer, her voice low and urgent. "You need to stay away from him. This is emotional infidelity. Sarah, you can't just brush it off. Tom deserves better." I nodded, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "I know, but there's something about him that draws me in. It's like he sees me, really sees me. Tom, he's so busy, and I feel so alone. Being seen doesn't justify betrayal. Sarah, you need to think about what you want. Is it worth risking your marriage for a thrill?" Mia's words hit me like a cold splash of water. I knew she was right, but the thrill was intoxicating, almost addictive. "I'll confront him," I said, the decision suddenly crystallizing in my mind. "I need to set things right. I can't keep living like this." Mia frowned, her concern deepening. "Are you sure? What if he doesn't take it well?" "I have to do it. I can't allow this to go any further," I insisted, though a flicker of doubt gnawed at me. The thought of seeing Mark again sent shivers down my spine, a mix of fear and excitement. As I returned home, the weight of my decision hung heavy in the air. I found Tom in our bedroom, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware of the chaos brewing inside me. I wanted to tell him everything, to confess my feelings and my guilt, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I plastered on a smile, knowing full well that the confrontation loomed ahead. But as I lay in bed that night, the memory of Mark's kiss replayed in my mind, igniting a spark of longing I wasn't ready to extinguish. My resolve wavered, caught between the thrill of newfound desire and the promise of a life I had committed to. Would I find the courage to confront Mark, or would I let the thrill consume me? The question hung in the air, heavy and unresolved, as I drifted off into a restless sleep. As I sat in the pew, the familiar scent of polished wood and faint incense filled the air, but today it felt suffocating. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor, yet my heart felt heavy with shadows. I fiddled nervously with the hem of my dress, stealing glances at Pastor Mark as he prepared for his sermon. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, guilt, and an undeniable thrill that clashed violently within me. "Good morning, Sarah," Mark greeted, his voice smooth like honey. He smiled, and for a moment, the world around us faded. "Good morning, Pastor," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the eyes of the congregation on us, but all I could focus on was the man standing before me. Memories of that kiss flooded my mind, igniting a fire I desperately wanted to extinguish. The service began, and Mark's voice resonated through the hall, but I found it hard to concentrate on his words. Instead, they melded into a blur of sound as I replayed the moment that had shattered my sense of self. How could I have let it happen? I was a married woman, devoted to Tom, yet here I was, entangled in something I couldn't quite understand. As Mark spoke of forgiveness and redemption, I felt my heart race. Was he talking to me? The weight of his gaze seemed to linger on me longer than necessary, as though he knew the turmoil I was grappling with. My thoughts spiraled further. Did he regret what had happened? Or was he waiting for me to lean into this chaotic connection we'd forged? After what felt like an eternity, the service concluded. I stood up, my legs shaky, as people began to filter out. I knew I had to talk to Mark, confront him about that kiss and what it meant, but I hesitated. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if it was just a fleeting moment of weakness for him? My heart raced, each beat echoing the conflict within me. I took a deep breath and made my way to the church office, where I found him alone, sorting through some papers. The door creaked as I entered, and he looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his tone warm and inviting. "I need to talk to you," I blurted out, the urgency in my voice startling even me. He nodded, his expression turning serious. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I closed the door behind me, my heart pounding. "About the kiss?" Mark stepped closer, a tense silence enveloping us. "I've been thinking about it too," he admitted, his voice low. "I didn't mean to overstep, but there's something between us, isn't there?" I felt a flush creep up my neck. "I'm married, Mark. I shouldn't have let it happen." "But you did," he said, his eyes searching mine, filled with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. "And I can't pretend it didn't mean anything to me. I care about you, Sarah." His words sent a jolt through me, igniting a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "You know this is wrong, right? I can't just ignore my life and my responsibilities." He took another step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes the heart doesn't care about right or wrong. It just knows what it wants." Just then, the door swung open, and Tom walked in, a bright smile on his face. "Surprise, Sarah? I thought I'd come by and see if you wanted to grab lunch together." The air shifted, the warmth of Mark's presence replaced by a sudden chill. Tom's smile faltered slightly as he sensed the tension in the room. "Hey, Tom," I stammered, my heart racing. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing his features as he quickly composed himself. "Pastor Mark," Tom greeted, his tone cordial yet cautious. "What's going on here?" Mark cleared his throat, stepping back, trying to mask the awkwardness. "Just having a discussion about community outreach programs," he said, his voice steady, but I could see the underlying tension in his eyes. Tom looked between us, a hint of confusion furrowing his brow. "Oh, right. That sounds important." "Yeah, it is," I added quickly, feeling the weight of both their gazes on me. The truth hung in the air, heavy and unspoken, and I knew I had to tread carefully. I was just getting some advice. Tom nodded, but I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. I felt trapped, my heart torn between the man I had vowed to love and the one who had stirred feelings I never wanted to confront. As the three of us stood in that small office, the tension crackled, and I realized that the web of deceit was tightening around me, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The evening air was thick with tension as I prepared for dinner with Tom. The table was set, candles flickering softly, casting warm shadows on the walls. I forced myself to smile, attempting to project an image of domestic bliss, but my mind was a tumultuous storm of guilt and confusion. Every clink of cutlery reminded me of the kiss I had shared with Mark, a moment that felt both intoxicating and treacherous. Tom entered the dining room, his work boots leaving traces of the day behind him. "Hey, Sarah, smells amazing in here," he said, his eyes lighting up with genuine happiness. He leaned down to kiss my cheek, and I felt a pang of guilt shoot through me. "Thanks, Tom. I thought we could have a nice dinner together," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. As we sat down, Tom began recounting his day, animatedly discussing the progress on his latest construction project. I nodded, offering half-hearted responses, my thoughts drifting to Mark and the weight of our shared secret. "Are you okay? You seem a bit distracted," Tom asked, concern etching his features. I swallowed hard, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. "Just tired, I guess. Work's been a bit overwhelming," I lied, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask than a reflection of my emotions. "Well, we could use some time away, just the two of us. How about a weekend trip to the lake?" he suggested, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "That sounds great," I said, though my voice lacked the enthusiasm I wished I could project. Inside, I was wrestling with the knowledge that I was about to betray his trust again. Later that evening, as I washed the dishes, my phone buzzed on the counter. My heart raced as I saw Mark's name flash across the screen. He wanted to meet. My mind whirled with conflicting emotions, but I felt a pull, an irresistible urge to see him again. I had barely processed the weight of my decision before my fingers were typing a reply. "Okay," I texted back, a simple word that felt like a doorway opening to a world I had never intended to enter. The park was quiet, illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights. I arrived early, pacing nervously, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. The air was cool against my skin, but I felt hot with anticipation and dread. When Mark finally appeared, my heart leaped into my throat. "Hey," he said, his voice low and inviting. He stepped closer, and I could feel the electric tension between us. I hesitated, remembering the weight of my vows, the love I had for Tom, but the pull toward Mark was undeniable. "Sarah," he said softly, reaching out to touch my arm. "I've been thinking about you." I could barely breathe as he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine with a tenderness that shattered my resolve. I kissed him back, the world around us fading away, lost in a moment of reckless abandon. But just as quickly as it began, clarity hit me like a cold wave. I pulled away, breathless, the reality crashing back down. "What are we doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. The thrill of the kiss was still tingling on my lips, but the guilt was suffocating. "I don't know," Mark admitted, his eyes searching mine. "But I can't stop thinking about you, Sarah. I want to be with you." I shook my head, my heart racing. "I can't. I'm married, Mark. This isn't right." Before he could respond, I turned away, ready to flee from the chaos I had invited into my life. But as I took a few steps, I heard footsteps behind me. My heart sank as I turned to see Tom emerging from the shadows, his face etched with confusion and hurt. "Sarah," he called, his voice filled with uncertainty. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the weight of my choices crashing down like a tidal wave. What would I say? How could I explain the unexplainable? In that moment, the world around me faded, and all I could focus on was the look in Tom's eyes: betrayal, confusion, and an unmistakable sense of loss. I stood frozen, the gravity of my actions hanging thick in the air, leaving me to wonder if there was any way out of the web I had woven. The tension in the air was palpable as I stood in our small, cozy living room, heart racing, waiting for Tom to return from his meeting. The guilt gnawed at me from the inside out. I could hear the faint sounds of him chatting with our neighbor, and my mind raced back to the park, to that kiss with Mark. How could I have let it go that far? I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. When Tom finally walked through the door, his brow was furrowed with concern. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice softening as he noticed my expression. "You okay? You seem off." I swallowed hard, searching for the right words. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I was just out for a walk, thinking about us." Tom's eyes lit up with hope, and he moved closer. "I think we need to talk about things. I want to make sure we're good, especially with our anniversary coming up." "Of course," I said, my heart pounding. How could I tell him I'd just met Mark again, that we had kissed, that I was feeling things I shouldn't? I was actually thinking we could use a little guidance. Maybe I should talk to Pastor Mark. The moment the words left my mouth, I wished I could take them back. Tom's expression shifted, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Pastor Mark? What do you mean?" I hesitated, weighing my options. If I told him the truth, it would shatter him. But if I didn't, I felt like I was lying by omission. I just thought, maybe he could help us work through some things. I'd been feeling a bit lost. Tom studied me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. "I don't know, Sarah. I trust Mark, but I don't want you to feel like you need to go to him for help. We should be able to talk about these things together." "You're right," I said quickly, trying to divert his attention. "Maybe I'm just overthinking things. We've had a lot on our plates lately." His shoulders relaxed slightly, and he nodded. "Okay, just promise me that if something's bothering you, you'll talk to me. I don't want to feel like I'm in the dark." "I promise," I said, feeling the weight of those words. But as soon as he left to grab us something to drink, a wave of nausea washed over me. I had to set things right. I couldn't keep running from this. The next day, I found myself pacing in our living room, dread settling in my stomach. Tom had decided to confront Mark, and I could only imagine how that would unfold. I could picture them standing in the church, Tom with his stoic determination, and Mark with that false charm he so effortlessly wore. My hands trembled as I thought of the potential fallout. What if Tom found out everything? As the clock ticked on, I felt a sense of impending doom. I could hear the faint sounds of the church bells ringing in the distance, a reminder of the life I wanted to preserve. I picked up my phone, staring at the screen as if it held the answers I desperately needed. Should I warn Mark? Should I tell Tom everything? But deep down, I knew I had to let Tom confront Mark. He deserved the truth, even if it shattered our lives in the process. Later, at the church, I stood in the back, watching as Tom walked in, his posture tense. A knot formed in my stomach as I saw Mark at the pulpit, oblivious to the storm brewing behind him. "Mark," Tom's voice boomed, cutting through the murmurs of the congregation. "We need to talk." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to them. I wanted to sink into the floor, to disappear entirely, but instead, I stood rooted in place, heart racing. Mark turned slowly, a look of surprise crossing his face. "Tom, what's going on?" "You know exactly what's going on," Tom replied, his voice steady, but I could hear the underlying tremor of anger. "You've been manipulating Sarah, haven't you? Trying to drive a wedge between us." Mark raised an eyebrow, defensiveness creeping into his posture. "That's not true. I'm just here to guide." I felt a surge of panic. This was spiraling out of control, and I needed to stop it before it turned into something irreversible. But before I could move, I heard Tom's voice again, filled with accusation. You think you can just take advantage of her when I'm not around? The congregation gasped, the tension thickening like fog. I stood frozen, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I could feel the eyes of the church on me, the judgment, the confusion. And in that moment, something shifted within me. I could no longer hide from the truth, not from them, not from myself. As I took a step forward, ready to confront the reality of my actions, I realized that I was standing at the precipice of my life, and there was no turning back. My heart raced as I stood in front of the congregation. Every eye fixed on me, the weight of my secret pressing down like a heavy stone in my chest. I had come to this moment with the intention of confessing the truth, to lay bare my feelings for Mark and the betrayal I had unleashed upon Tom. But just as I opened my mouth to speak, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the church creaked open. A hush fell over the crowd as a familiar figure stepped inside. My estranged sister, Emily. "Sarah," she called, her voice slicing through the tension like a knife. I felt the color drain from my face. Emily hadn't been a part of my life for years, not since our last fight tore us apart. And now, here she was with a look of urgency that made my stomach churn. "Emily?" I murmured, completely thrown off balance. I glanced at Tom, who looked equally bewildered, confusion and anger flickering across his features. Mark's face, however, shifted to one of sheer panic, as if he had seen a ghost. "You don't know this, but I have something important to tell you about Mark," she said, stepping closer, her eyes darting around the room, gauging the audience's reactions. The congregation gasped collectively, their whispers buzzing through the air like a swarm of angry bees. My heart pounded louder, drowning out their murmurs. I had come here to confess my guilt, but now, with Emily's unexpected arrival, the focus shifted entirely. "Emily, what are you talking about?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hands trembled at my sides. "Just listen to me," she urged, her tone growing more intense. "Mark has a history of deceit. He's manipulated people before, and I can't let you fall into his trap." I thought I was too late to stop this. I felt a cold wave wash over me. "What do you mean?" Emily took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for the impact of her next words. "I've seen the aftermath of his lies before. People have lost their faith, their families, everything, because of him. You need to be careful, Sarah." Mark took a step forward, his voice rising above the murmurs. "Emily, that's not true. You have no proof. You're just trying to ruin me." The tension in the room escalated, and I could feel Tom's eyes boring into me, confusion morphing into suspicion. I was torn between my desire to protect my family and the truth that had been gnawing at my conscience. "Sarah, is it true?" Tom's voice was low, anger simmering just beneath the surface. I could see his hands clenching into fists. "Have you been lying to me about him?" I glanced at Mark, who looked desperate, his eyes pleading with me to stay silent. But the gravity of Emily's revelation hung heavy in the air, and I could not ignore the truth that had been revealed. I don't know what to say," I stammered, my heart pounding in my chest. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Then why did you meet him in the park?" Tom's words cut deep, and I flinched at the accusation, my mind racing through the memories of our stolen moments. "Because I was confused. I felt lost." I shouted, my voice breaking. "But Emily is right. Mark's feelings complicated everything, and I didn't want to hurt you." The room fell silent, the weight of my confession hanging in the air like a thick fog. I could feel the eyes of the congregation on me, judging, questioning. Mark's expression shifted from panic to rage. "You don't have to listen to her, Sarah. She's trying to turn you against me. Stop." I cried, feeling the walls close in around me. I had to make a choice, protect my family or protect my heart. But the truth felt like a double-edged sword, threatening to cut deeply. As I stared at both men, the weight of my choices bore down on my shoulders. The path ahead was littered with consequences, and I knew that whatever decision I made would change everything. Would I reveal my betrayal, risking my marriage and the life I had built? Or would I choose self-preservation, hiding the truth and potentially allowing further harm to come to those I loved? In that moment, I felt utterly lost, standing at the precipice of a choice that could shatter everything I held dear. The silence stretched on, and I knew that whatever I said next would be the turning point of my life.